the Bible is bad. The continuation of my argument that the Bible is not a good source of moral values. God commits acts of genocide and mass murder. In the book of Genesis, because of widespread evil, God creates a great genocidal flood, killing off virtually every human being, including innocent children below the age of accountability. According to my conscience, genocide is morally reprehensible. What about your conscience? Consider this. In the first book of Chronicles, chapter 21, verses 1 to 14, God didn't like King David performing a census, and so God causes the death of 70,000 people. I quote, "And Satan stood up against Israel and provoked David to number Israel. And David said to Joab and to the rulers of the people, Go number Israel from Beersheba even to Dan, and bring the number of them to me, that I may know it. And God was displeased with this thing. Therefore he smote Israel. So the Lord sent pestilence upon Israel, and there fell of Israel 70,000 men." Biological warfare in the Bible. God wages it. Kills off 70,000 people. Not a good source of moral values. Look at the book of Joshua. Genocide against the Canaanites. Well, the Canaanites didn't worship God. Mass murder in the name of religion? It's wrong. Murdering children? That's just plain wrong. Look at the book of Exodus, chapter 12, the Passover. That's when Jehovah murders all the firstborn male children in Egypt while passing over the Israelite children. This book, the Holy Bible, I wouldn't swear an oath on this book. Here's another point in my argument about how the Bible is not a good source of moral values. The transference of punishment from the guilty to the innocent. Now, modern notions of justice are that you punish the guilty, right? If someone commits a crime, that someone does the time. But in the Bible says something a little bit different. It contains instances where the transfer of responsibility from the guilty to the innocent takes place, sometimes under the direct instruction of God. Book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 5. It's one of the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to idols, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation. Just consider that for a moment. Someone commits a crime. So we'll punish their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren? No, that is completely against a modern progressive notion of justice. But that's what God advocates in the Bible. To blame a person for a crime that occurred before they were born? That's ludicrous. That's immoral. It's wrong. Consider the Ten Commandments. Are they really the highest priority of moral precepts? First commandment, believe in God. Second commandment, don't worship other gods, and don't make any representational art. No blasphemy. Respect the Sabbath. Well, those are really just religious, aren't they? They're not particularly ethical. But when it comes to thou shalt not kill, well, just take a look at the killing that God himself has done. Seems kind of hypocritical, doesn't it? Where's the commandment against rape? What about the commandment against child abuse? Huh. You know, how high on the list of priorities are these? Obviously not very high. I mean, what? Resting on the Sabbath day is more important? Not making representational art is more important than, say, commanding men not to rape? Priorities tell about moral values, and consider the Bible's priorities with the Ten Commandments. Murder is wrong, not because the Bible says so, but because our conscience tells us. It's not because the Bible says God forbids it. We don't need the Bible to tell us how to live morally. In fact, God's own behavior in the Bible provides many examples of how not to live morally. I'm going to wrap this argument up with the point that the Bible is immoral in its regard for sex and for women. Okay? Question: is it morally right to regard homosexual behavior as punishable by death? Well, not by my conscience. But according to the Bible, homosexuality is punishable by death. Read the book of Leviticus, chapter 20, verse 13. If a man also lieth with mankind as he lieth with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood shall be upon them. How about adultery? Punishable by death. Look up Deuteronomy chapter 22. How about prostitution? Whoa. Punished by burning the woman alive, according to Leviticus chapter 21 verse 9. Just look it up. It's in there. And here's one of many examples of misogyny in the Bible. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 21 verses 10 to 14. I'll simply read them. You decide for yourself. When thou goest forth to war against thine enemies, and the Lord thy God hath delivered them into thine hands, and thou hast taken them captive, and seest among the captives a beautiful woman, and hast a desire unto her, that thou wouldst have her to thy wife, then thou shalt bring her home to thine house, and she shall shave her head, and pare her nails, and she shall put the raiment of her captivity from off her, and remain in thine house. And it shall be, if thou have no delight in her, then thou shalt let her go whither she will. But thou shalt not sell her at all for money. Thou shalt not make merchandise of her, because thou hast humbled her.